My father's search history after they died explained everything. The cursor blinked mockingly at me as I stared at Dad's laptop screen, my coffee growing cold in the sterile silence of his home office. 3 weeks since the funeral, and I was finally forcing myself to go through his digital life, emails, photos, banking passwords Linda would need. Standard grief admin that no one prepares you for. I'd been putting this off, obviously. Even now, his coffee mug still sat on the desk with a brown ring stained at the bottom. His reading glasses folded neatly beside a stack of bills. Everything exactly as he'd left it on February 15th, the morning Linda found him collapsed in their kitchen. Just get through the browser history and call it a day, I muttered, clicking on Chrome. I expected the usual suspects, news sites, Amazon orders, maybe some questionable YouTube rabbit holes about World War II documentaries. Dad was predictable that way. The first few entries were normal enough. ESPN. Weather.com, his bank's login page from February 14th at 11:47 p.m. Then I scrolled down further, and my blood turned to ice. February 14th, 2024, 11:52 p.m. Antifreeze poisoning symptoms humans. February 14th, 2024, 11:55 p.m. How long does antifreeze poisoning take? February 14th, 2024, 12:03 a.m. Wife putting antifreeze in food signs. My hand started shaking. I had to read each entry twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The dates were all there, dozens of them stretching back months. Dad's final desperate internet searches, timestamped in the middle of sleepless nights. February 13th, 2024, 2:17 a.m. Who to call when you think someone is poisoning you. February 12th, 2024, 1:44 a.m. Antifreeze sweet taste cover-up. February 10th, 2024, 3:22 a.m. Police report poisoning no proof. I scrolled faster, my heart hammering against my ribs. The searches went back to November, 4 months of Dad desperately Googling variations of the same terrifying question. Someone was poisoning him, and he knew it. January 28th, 2024, 2:55 a.m. Family thinks I'm crazy paranoid help. January 22nd, 2024, 4:11 a.m. Memory problems from antifreeze. January 15th, 2024, 12:39 a.m. Linda Morrison background check free. Linda. My stepmother of 3 years, who'd been so devastated at the funeral. Who'd held my hand during the service and whispered about how sudden it all was. How the doctors said Dad's heart just gave out, probably stress from his recent mental decline. That's what she'd called it. Mental decline. She'd been telling everyone for months that Dad was getting paranoid, forgetting things, making wild accusations. Even I'd started to believe her. God, especially me. The final entries made my stomach lurch. February 14th, 2024, 11:34 p.m. How to reconnect with a strange daughter. February 14th, 2024, 11:41 p.m. Sarah Chen, marketing executive, Chicago contact. He'd been looking for me. Hours before he died, Dad had been trying to figure out how to reach me. We hadn't spoken since Christmas, after that awful fight where Linda convinced me he was losing his grip on reality. Where I'd stormed out calling him paranoid and cruel. I screenshot every single search, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. 47 searches total. A digital breadcrumb trail of a man who knew he was being murdered but couldn't get anyone to believe him. Including his own daughter. I sat back in Dad's chair, staring at the evidence of his final, desperate weeks. Linda had played us all perfectly. But she'd made one mistake. She'd forgotten to clear his browser history. I must have sat there for 20 minutes, just staring at those searches, before my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Asterisk Sarah honey, how are you doing today? I know going through Robert's things is hard. Take your time. Red heart asterisk. The heart emoji made my skin crawl. I screenshotted that too, everything was evidence now. My hands were still shaking as I typed back a neutral response about making good progress. I needed to think clearly. Dad's searches painted a horrifying picture, but Linda wasn't stupid. She'd been a nurse for 15 years before she met Dad, she knew exactly how to make this look natural. The death certificate listed acute cardiac arrest. No autopsy had been performed because there was no reason to suspect foul play. A 64-year-old man with mild hypertension having a heart attack wasn't exactly shocking. But antifreeze poisoning could cause cardiac arrest. I googled it myself, hands trembling as I typed. Ethylene glycol poisoning caused kidney failure, neurological damage, and yes, fatal heart arrhythmias. The symptoms Dad had been searching matched perfectly with what Linda had been telling everyone were signs of his mental decline. Confusion. Memory problems. Paranoid delusions. Except they weren't delusions. I scrolled back through his search history more carefully this time, looking for patterns. The searches intensified after Christmas, right after our fight. That's when Linda would have felt safer, knowing Dad's relationship with me was fractured. His only ally was gone. December 28th, 2023, 1:15 a.m. Antifreeze detection, how long body. December 30th, 2023, 3:44 a.m. Linda Morrison married before Robert Chin. January 3rd, 2024, 2:22 a.m. Linda Morrison previous husband death. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed Dad's laptop and opened a new browser window, typing in Linda's full name plus previous husband. It took some digging. Linda Morrison was a common enough name, but I found it buried in a 3-paragraph obituary from 2019 in Tucson, Arizona. Asterisk David Morrison, 59, passed away unexpectedly at home on March 15, 2019, after a brief illness. He is survived by his loving wife Linda Morrison, asterisk. Brief illness. Unexpected death. Linda had been widowed before, just like she was now. I searched deeper, my marketing background finally useful for something important. Social media profiles, public records, newspaper archives. Linda had lived in Tucson from 2017 to 2020. She'd moved to Chicago 6 months after David Morrison's death, right around the time she would have received his life insurance payout. Dad's life insurance policy was for $750,000. I knew because Linda had mentioned it at the funeral, talking about how she'd donate some to Dad's favorite charity. So generous. So grieving. A new text from Linda popped up, asterisk, don't forget dinner Sunday. I'm making your father's favorite pot roast. We can go through his photo albums together. Asterisk. The casual mention of cooking made my stomach turn. How many meals had she prepared for Dad over the past few months? How many times had she served him coffee, juice, anything with a sweet taste to mask the antifreeze? I looked at Dad's final search again. Asterisk, Sarah Chen, marketing executive, Chicago contact. Asterisk, he'd been trying to reach me. He'd known he was running out of time. The worst part wasn't just that Linda had murdered him. It was that she'd isolated him so completely, made everyone believe he was losing his mind, that he'd died thinking I'd abandoned him. That his own daughter had chosen his killer's word over his. But Linda had underestimated Dad's determination. And she'd definitely underestimated mine. I opened a new document and started typing everything I knew. If Linda Morrison had done this before, she was going to pay for it this time. Both times. I spent the next 6 hours building a timeline that made me physically sick. Dad's browser history wasn't just random late-night panic searches, it was methodical documentation of his own murder, laid out in chronological order like a case file. November 15th, first search for antifreeze taste and drinks. Linda had moved in with him that October. November 28th, why do I feel dizzy after meals at home but not restaurants? December 2nd, Linda Morrison nursing license Illinois verification. I cross-referenced that one immediately. Linda's nursing license had been suspended in Arizona from March 2018 to September 2019, a 16-month gap that perfectly bracketed her previous husband's death. The Illinois Board of Nursing website showed she transferred her license here in January 2020, but there was a note about disciplinary action pending review from previous state. What kind of disciplinary action gets a nurse suspended for over a year? My phone rang, Linda's contact photo filling the screen, a selfie of her and Dad from their wedding day, both grinning at Navy Pier. I let it go to voicemail, but she called back immediately. Sarah, sweetheart, I was getting worried when you didn't answer my texts. Sorry, I got caught up going through Dad's files. You know how he was about keeping every receipt. Linda's laugh sounded forced. Oh, your father and his paperwork. Find anything interesting? The question felt loaded. Just the usual stuff. Insurance documents, bank statements. Nothing surprising. Good, good. I know this is hard for you, honey. Going through someone's private things always feels like such an invasion, doesn't it? Sometimes it's better to just let sleeping dogs lie. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean? Just that your father's memory was getting so scattered toward the end. He was researching all sorts of strange things online, poor man. Conspiracy theories, wild medical theories. I caught him Googling symptoms for diseases he definitely didn't have. The doctor said that kind of paranoid thinking is common with early dementia. She knew. Linda knew exactly what I'd found, and she was already spinning it. The important thing, she continued, is remembering the Robert we loved, not the confused man he was becoming. Don't let whatever odd things you might find taint your memories of him. Of course not, I managed. I should probably get going, though. Long day. See you Sunday for dinner, sweetheart. We'll get through this together. After she hung up, I sat staring at the phone. Linda wasn't just covering her tracks, she was 3 steps ahead of me. She'd been preparing this narrative for months, planting seeds with everyone about Dad's mental decline. If I went to the police with browser history, she'd claim it proved her point about his paranoid delusions. But I had something she didn't know about. I opened Dad's email and searched for David Morrison. Nothing. Then I tried Arizona, Tucson, previous husband. Still nothing. But Dad was thorough. If he'd been investigating Linda's past, he would have documented it somewhere. I checked his documents folder, then his desktop. Hidden in a folder labeled Tax Records 2019 was a file called lmbackground.docs. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Asterisk Linda Morrison research notes. Started, January 8, 2024. Updated, February 14, 2024 asterisk. Asterisk David Morrison died March 15, 2019, Tucson, Arizona. No obituary mentions cause of death beyond brief illness. Death certificate filed Pima County, need TO request copy. Life insurance payout, $400,000, confirmed via public probate records. Linda moved to Chicago 7 months after death asterisk. Asterisk nursing license issues. Suspended Arizona March 2018 for medication discrepancies. 2 patients under her care died unexpectedly Jan-February 2018. Reinstated September 2019, why the delay? Asterisk. Asterisk financial timeline. David's insurance paid November 2019. Linda purchased new car December 2019, $45,000 cash. Moved to Chicago January 2020. Met me March 2020 asterisk. The final entry was dated February 14, 2024, the day he died. Asterisk called Arizona Board of Nursing, they cannot discuss details but transferred me to their fraud investigation unit. Something is very wrong. If something happens to me, Sarah needs to see this asterisk. Dad hadn't just suspected Linda was poisoning him. He'd proven she'd done it before. I printed everything, Dad's searches, his research notes, the Arizona records I could find online. My hands moved on autopilot while my brain tried to process what I discovered. Dad had been building a case against Linda right up until the day she killed him. The Arizona Board of Nursing website had a public disciplinary database. I searched Linda's license number from Dad's notes and found the record, medication discrepancies resulting in patient harm. The details were vague, but the timeline was damning. 2 patients had died under suspicious circumstances in early 2018. Linda's license was suspended in March, just weeks later. She'd killed before. Multiple times. My phone buzzed with another text from Linda, asterisk I'm at the grocery store. Should I pick up anything special for Sunday? I know your father always loved when I made those chocolate chip cookies. Asterisk. The casual domesticity made my stomach churn. How many times had Linda poisoned those cookies? How many meals had Dad eaten while knowing they might kill him, but feeling trapped with nowhere to turn? I needed help, but who would believe me? Linda had spent months convincing everyone that Dad was losing his mind. She was the grieving widow, the devoted nurse who'd cared for her paranoid husband until the very end. I was the estranged daughter who'd barely visited, who'd screamed at him during our last conversation. But Dad's notes mentioned the Arizona Fraud Investigation Unit. Someone there might remember Linda Morrison. I found the number online and called, hands shaking. The phone rang 4 times before a tired-sounding woman answered. Arizona Board of Nursing, Fraud Investigation, this is Detective Martinez. Hi, I'm calling about a former nurse, Linda Morrison. She was disciplined in 2018, and I paused, unsure how to explain without sounding insane. I think she might have hurt someone else. Ma'am, I can't discuss specific disciplinary cases, but if you have evidence of current nursing violations, you can file a complaint with the appropriate state board. She's not practicing anymore. She's in Illinois now, and her husband just died, and I found evidence that she... Hold on. Martinez's voice sharpened. Did you say Linda Morrison? And her husband died recently? Yes, 3 weeks ago. Robert Chin. They said it was a heart attack, but I found his browser history, and he was researching antifreeze poisoning for months before he died. Silence on the other end. Then, ma'am, I'm going to need you to call the Chicago Police Department immediately. Ask for Detective Williams in homicide and tell him Detective Martinez from Arizona referred you. Tell him Linda Morrison is involved, and that we've been waiting 4 years for someone to call us about her. My blood turned to ice. Waiting 4 years? I can't say more over the phone, but Chicago PD needs to know about this today. Linda Morrison should have been arrested years ago. After Martinez hung up, I sat staring at the phone. The Arizona authorities had suspected Linda all along, but couldn't prove anything. Now she'd moved states and done it again, and Dad had died trying to expose her. I started to dial Chicago PD, then stopped. If I called them now, Linda would know I'd found everything. She'd have time to destroy evidence, craft her story, maybe even disappear. I needed to be smarter than that. Sunday dinner was in 2 days. Linda expected me to show up, play the grieving daughter, eat her food while she consoled me about Dad's mental decline. She thought she'd won. But Linda had made a crucial mistake. She'd kept Dad isolated from everyone except me. Which meant I was the only person who could get close enough to her now to finish what he'd started. I opened a new document and began typing a detailed plan. If Linda Morrison wanted to play the long game, she was about to learn that Dad had taught me everything he knew about patience and strategy. And unlike him, I wasn't eating anything she cooked. I spent Saturday night setting up everything I'd need for Sunday dinner at Linda's. 3 hidden cameras, tiny things I'd ordered same-day delivery, the kind marketing agencies use for focus groups. 1 in my purse, 1 clipped to my jacket like a decorative pin, and a backup in my car. I'd also downloaded a voice recording app that would upload everything to the cloud in real time. If Linda was going to confess to anything, I needed it documented 6 ways to Sunday. The hardest part was acting normal when she texted me Saturday evening, asterisk so excited for tomorrow. I'm making Robert's favorite pot roast. Found his recipe card in his handwriting, made me cry happy tears. See you at 2 p.m. Red heart asterisk. The mention of his recipe card felt like a taunt. Everything Linda did was calculated to seem loving while twisting the knife deeper. Sunday morning, I called Detective Williams at Chicago PD. Martinez in Arizona had briefed him, and his first words made my stomach drop. Ms. Chen, how quickly can you get down here? We've been building a case on Linda Morrison since yesterday, and you're not safe. She's expecting me for dinner in 4 hours. Absolutely not. Ma'am, Linda Morrison is suspected in at least 3 deaths across 2 states. She's extremely dangerous, and if she knows you found evidence. She doesn't know. I can get her to confess. I have recording equipment. No. Williams' voice was sharp. We don't use civilians as bait, especially when the suspect has a history of poisoning people. Come in now, and we'll handle this properly. But I knew properly meant months of investigation while Linda liquidated Dad's assets and potentially disappeared. The life insurance company had already approved her claim. She was selling the house. In 2 weeks, Linda Morrison might cease to exist, and Sarah Morrison or Jennifer Davis or whoever she became next would be shopping for husband number 3 in some other state. I understand your position, detective. But I'm going to that dinner. Ms. Chen. I hung up and turned off my phone. Williams would probably send patrol cars to Linda's house, but that would just spook her. I needed her to feel safe enough to let her guard down. At 1:45 p.m., I parked outside Linda's house, Dad's house, technically, though she'd already had the deed transferred. The mortgage was paid off, and the property was worth $380,000. Combined with his life insurance and savings, Linda stood to inherit nearly $1 million. Enough to disappear very comfortably. Linda answered the door in Dad's favorite apron, the one that said kiss the cook. The sight made me want to vomit, but I forced a smile. Sarah. You look tired, honey. Are you sleeping okay? Some nights are harder than others. I hugged her, fighting every instinct that screamed at me to run. Something smells incredible. Your father's pot roast. I found his recipe card, and you know how particular he was about his measurements. She led me to the kitchen, where Dad's handwriting was indeed visible on a yellowed index card. 3 pounds chuck roast, 2 cups beef broth, 1 tablespoon Worcestershire. I picked up the card, recognizing Dad's careful script. He'd written this recipe at least 15 years ago. Mom had teased him about his secret ingredient that made it better than hers. What was the secret ingredient? I asked. He never told me. Linda's smile faltered for just a second. Oh, you know your father. Always claimed it was love and patience, but I think it was just the extra garlic. Wrong answer. Dad's secret ingredient was a splash of red wine in the braising liquid. He told me when I was 16, making me promise not to tell Mom he was improving her recipe. Linda had been married to him for 3 years and didn't know something I'd learned as a teenager. How much had she really cared about Dad beyond his bank account? The house feels so empty without him, I said, starting the recording app discreetly. I keep expecting him to come around the corner, you know? I do know. Although toward the end, with his mental state. Linda shook her head sadly. Sometimes I felt like I'd already lost him months before he actually died. The paranoia, the wild accusations. It was heartbreaking. What kind of accusations? Linda busied herself stirring the gravy. Oh, you know how he got. Convinced I was trying to hurt him somehow. Poor man thought I was poisoning his food, can you imagine? Me, a nurse who took an oath to do no harm. The casual way she said it made my blood run cold. Linda was testing me, seeing how I'd react to the word poisoning. That's awful. Did his doctor think it was dementia? Dr. Peterson was concerned about early-stage paranoid dementia, yes. We discussed medication options, but your father refused treatment. Said he didn't trust anyone anymore. Linda's voice carried perfect notes of sadness and frustration. I think that's why he was doing all that strange internet research. Looking up medical conditions, conspiracy theories. His browser history was, well, it was heartbreaking to see how confused he'd become. She knew I'd found the searches. Linda was spinning them preemptively, just like she'd done on the phone. But she'd made another mistake. Dr. Peterson had retired in November. I'd seen the notice in Dad's papers. Linda was lying about the dementia diagnosis, which meant she was lying about everything. Dr. Peterson was always so thorough with Dad's care, I said carefully, watching Linda's face. When did you last speak with him about the diagnosis? Oh, it was right before. Linda paused, stirring the gravy more vigorously. Well, you know how these things go. Multiple appointments, lots of discussions about treatment options. I nodded sympathetically while my heart pounded. Dr. Peterson had retired in November, but Linda was talking about recent consultations. She was improvising now, getting sloppy. I should probably get his medical records, I said. For the insurance paperwork. Dr. Peterson's office should have everything, right? Actually, your father switched doctors in December. Dr. Kim at Northwestern. Much closer to the house. Linda's recovery was smooth, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. I have all the relevant paperwork already copied for the insurance company. Of course she did. Linda controlled every piece of documentation about Dad's final months. But she couldn't control what I'd already found. The house sale is moving quickly, I mentioned, accepting the glass of iced tea she offered. I didn't drink it. The realtor said you might close within 2 weeks. The market's so hot right now. And honestly, Sarah, I can't stay here. Too many memories. Linda sat across from me, cradling her own glass. Your father and I were planning to travel more, you know. See Europe, maybe take that cruise to Alaska he always talked about. The casual mention of future plans they'd never have made my stomach turn. How long had Linda been planning Dad's death? Had she been researching European real estate while slowly poisoning him? He mentioned wanting to reconnect with me, I said quietly. Especially after Christmas. I feel terrible about our fight. Linda's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. Your father talked about you constantly, honey. He understood you were busy with your career. He never blamed you for anything. Another lie. Dad's search history told a different story. He'd been desperately trying to reach me because he knew I was his only potential ally. Linda had worked hard to keep us estranged. Did he ever try to call me? In those last few weeks? Robert was confused about a lot of things toward the end. He'd sometimes forget he had a phone, or forget numbers he'd known for years. Linda's voice carried practiced patience. The night he died, he spent hours on his computer. I found him there around midnight, just staring at the screen. I tried to convince him to come to bed, but he said he had important work to finish. My throat tightened. Dad had been searching for ways to contact me at 11:41 p.m. on February 14th. Linda had interrupted him. What kind of important work? Who knows? He was researching medical symptoms again, I think. Always convinced something was wrong with him that the doctors were missing. Linda shook her head sadly. I should have pushed harder for the psychiatric evaluation Dr. Kim suggested. Another fictional doctor, another manufactured story. Linda's web of lies was getting more elaborate by the minute. The oven timer chimed, and Linda stood to check the roast. Almost ready. Your father would be so happy we're doing this together, Sarah. He worried constantly about you being alone in Chicago. As she bent over the oven, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Hanging on a hook near the stove was a small key, the kind used for storage units. It hadn't been there when Dad was alive. New storage unit? I asked casually. Linda followed my gaze and quickly unhooked the key, slipping it into her pocket. Just some of Robert's things I couldn't bear to throw away. Old tools, golf clubs. I thought maybe someday you'd want them. But Dad's golf clubs were in the garage. I'd seen them yesterday. What was Linda storing that she needed to hide off-site? More importantly, what else had she hidden that I hadn't found yet? The storage unit key burned in my mind as Linda served dinner. She'd made a point of removing it the moment I noticed. Whatever she was hiding there was important enough to risk exposure. This roast is perfect, I lied, pushing the meat around my plate. Dad would have loved it. He always said the secret was in the timing. Linda took a generous bite of her own serving, which should have been reassuring but somehow made everything worse. Your father was so particular about his cooking. Remember how he'd hover over me in the kitchen, trying to help? I remembered no such thing. Dad had always been territorial about his kitchen, especially after Mom died. He'd barely let me help with dishes, let alone Linda with his recipes. But I nodded anyway, watching her carefully. Linda, can I ask you something personal? Of course, sweetheart. How did your first husband die? Linda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before she carefully set down her utensil. David had heart problems. Very sudden, very tragic. Her voice was steady, but her left eye twitched slightly. Why do you ask? I keep thinking about how you've lost 2 husbands to heart attacks. That must be incredibly traumatic. The doctor said these things can run in families, but David and Robert weren't related, obviously. Linda's laugh sounded forced. Just terrible luck, I suppose. Lightning striking twice. Were there any warning signs with David? Like there were with Dad's paranoia and confusion? Linda's hand stilled completely. David was different those last few months. Tired, suspicious. He'd gotten very paranoid about his medications, convinced the pharmacy was making errors. Poor man stopped taking his heart medication entirely because he thought it was making him sicker. The parallel was too perfect. Both husbands, both paranoid about their medications in the months before they died. Both convinced someone was trying to harm them. That's so sad. Did David do research online too, like Dad? David wasn't much for computers. Linda's response came too quickly. But he did become obsessed with medical websites toward the end. Always reading about drug interactions, side effects. It became quite compulsive. My recording app was capturing every word. Linda was describing the same pattern: husbands who suspected they were being poisoned, who became paranoid and compulsive about their health, who died suddenly of heart problems after months of unexplained symptoms. The life insurance must have helped, at least financially. Linda's smile tightened. Money doesn't replace a person, Sarah. But yes, David was responsible about his coverage. $400,000. It allowed me to start fresh after he died. She'd volunteered the exact amount Dad had written in his notes. Most people would be vague about insurance payouts, especially to someone they barely knew. Linda was either bragging or testing to see how much I knew. Dad's policy is quite a bit more, isn't it? Your father was very generous. $750,000, plus the house, plus his savings. Linda's voice carried a note of pride. He wanted to make sure I'd be comfortable. We discussed maybe starting a scholarship fund in his name. Nearly $1 million total. Enough to disappear anywhere in the world and live comfortably. But Linda was telling me exact figures most grieving widows wouldn't have memorized 3 weeks after the funeral. Have you thought about moving away? Starting completely fresh? Actually, yes. I've been looking at properties in Arizona. Full circle, you know? Back where I started. Linda's eyes gleamed. There's a lovely community outside Sedona. Very peaceful, very private. Arizona. Where she'd killed David Morrison and gotten away with it. Where she knew the system, knew how to navigate suspicion. Linda was planning to return to her hunting ground. That sounds perfect for you. I managed to keep my voice steady. When are you thinking of making the move? Soon. Maybe next month, once all the legal paperwork is finalized. Linda stood to clear plates. I've already put a deposit on a house. 2 acres, completely secluded. Perfect for someone who values their privacy. The way she said privacy made my skin crawl. Linda wasn't just planning to disappear, she was planning to find another victim. Some lonely widower in Sedona who wouldn't suspect that his caring new girlfriend had a history of collecting life insurance payouts. I should use the restroom, I said, standing. Too much iced tea. Of course, honey. You know where it is. Instead of heading to the bathroom, I slipped into Dad's office. Linda was running water in the kitchen, giving me maybe 2 minutes. I needed to find something concrete, evidence that hadn't been there when Dad was alive. His desk drawers had been reorganized. The files were different, older tax returns mixed with recent documents. But tucked behind his computer, I found something that made my blood run cold, a small plastic bag containing white crystalline residue. Antifreeze crystals. Linda had been keeping evidence of her murder weapon in Dad's own office. My hand shook as I photographed the bag from every angle. This was physical proof, not just browser history that could be explained away. Linda had been careless, probably planning to dispose of everything before she moved to Arizona. Sarah? Everything okay? Linda's voice carried from the kitchen. Just looking at Dad's books, I called back, quickly pocketing the bag. He had such interesting taste. When I returned to the kitchen, Linda was loading the dishwasher. Normal, domestic, completely innocent if you didn't know she was a serial killer planning her next move. I should probably head home soon, I said. Early meeting tomorrow. Of course. But Sarah? Linda turned to face me, her expression suddenly serious. I hope you know how much your father loved you. Despite everything that happened between you two toward the end, despite his confusion and anger, he never stopped loving you. The manipulation was breathtaking. Linda was positioning herself as the keeper of Dad's love, the bridge between us that only she could provide. Even now, she was working to keep me emotionally dependent on her version of events. Thank you, I managed. That means everything to me. As I gathered my purse and jacket, Linda walked me to the door. Same time next Sunday? I was thinking of making his favorite chocolate cake. Absolutely. I hugged her goodbye, every muscle in my body screaming at the contact. Thank you for keeping his memory alive. I drove 3 blocks before pulling over to call Detective Williams. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. Williams here. Detective, it's Sarah Chen. I have physical evidence, and Linda Morrison is planning to leave for Arizona within the month. Ms. Chen, where are you right now? Williams' voice was sharp with urgency. 3 blocks from her house. Detective, I found antifreeze crystals hidden in my father's office. She kept them like a trophy. My voice cracked. And she told me she's already put a deposit on a house in Sedona. 2 acres, completely isolated. Jesus. Did she see you take the evidence? No, but my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Linda's name filled the screen. She's calling me right now. Don't answer. Drive straight to the station. We're moving on this tonight. But something cold settled in my stomach as I stared at Linda's contact photo. Detective, she never calls. Only texts. Something's wrong. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Sarah, answer it. Put it on speaker. I'm recording everything on my end. I accepted the call with trembling fingers. Hi, Linda. Sweetheart, you left your earring here. The little silver one? Her voice carried that same manufactured sweetness. I found it on the bathroom counter. My hand instinctively went to my ears. Both earrings were still there. I met William's eyes through the phone speaker. We both knew what this meant. Oh, that's so sweet of you to check. But I think I have both of them. Are you sure? It was right there by the sink. Maybe it's from a different pair? Linda's tone sharpened almost imperceptibly. You were in the bathroom for quite a while. I was starting to worry you might have gotten sick from dinner. The threat was delicate but unmistakable. Linda knew I'd been somewhere else in the house. The question was, did she know what I'd found? I'm feeling fine. Probably just had too much iced tea. You know how it is. I do know. Your father had the same problem with my iced tea toward the end. Always claimed it tasted funny, made him feel strange. Linda's laugh was hollow. Paranoid delusions, Dr. Kim called them. Williams was frantically gesturing at me to keep her talking. Through the phone, I could hear him typing rapidly, probably running traces or calling for backup. Poor Dad. It must have been so hard for you, dealing with his confusion every day. It was exhausting, honestly. Robert became so suspicious of everything I did for him. Every meal, every drink, every kindness. He'd inspect his food like I was trying to poison him. Her voice carried perfect notes of wounded innocence. Can you imagine living with someone who thinks you're capable of murder? The word hung in the air between us. Murder. Linda had said it first, testing my reaction. That sounds incredibly painful for both of you. It was. Especially knowing that his research, all those late-night internet searches about antifreeze and poisoning, would eventually be found by someone who might misunderstand the situation. My blood turned to ice. She knew about Dad's browser history. She'd known all along. What do you mean? Well, if someone found those searches without context, without understanding Robert's mental state, they might jump to the wrong conclusions. They might think his delusions were actually reality. Linda's voice hardened. That would be very dangerous for everyone involved. Williams was making slashing motions across his throat. End the call, end it now. But Linda wasn't done. Sarah, honey, I need you to come back to the house. There's something important we need to discuss about your father's final wishes. Something I forgot to mention. Can't it wait until next Sunday? I'm afraid not. You see, I found some documents in Robert's office tonight. Papers that might upset you if you discovered them the wrong way. The steel in her voice was barely concealed now. It's better if we handle this together, as family. She'd been back in Dad's office after I left. Linda had found something missing, or maybe she'd noticed signs of my search. Either way, she was calling me back to clean up loose ends. I'll be right there, I heard myself say. No. Williams hissed, but I was already speaking. That's my good girl. I'll put on some coffee. We have so much to talk about. The line went dead. Williams stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Miss Chen, you are not going back to that house. Linda Morrison is done playing games. She knows you found evidence, and she's trying to eliminate the only witness who can tie her to your father's murder. Then why did I just agree to meet her? Williams' expression shifted from anger to understanding. Because you have a plan that's going to get you killed. No, I said, starting the engine. Because I have a plan that's going to get her arrested. But you need to move fast, detective. Linda Morrison has been one step ahead of everyone for years. Tonight, that changes. I was 3 blocks from Linda's house when Detective Williams called back. Change of plans, Miss Chen. We don't have enough units in position yet. Turn around now, that's an order. You don't give me orders, detective. I kept driving, hands steady on the wheel despite my racing heart. But I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens in that house tonight gets recorded. Linda Morrison doesn't walk away from this. Sarah. I hung up and turned off my phone. In my rearview mirror, I could see unmarked police cars following at a distance. Williams might not have enough units for a full tactical response, but he wasn't letting me go in completely alone. Linda's porch light was on when I pulled into the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see her silhouette moving around, preparing for my arrival. She'd probably spent the last 20 minutes deciding exactly how she was going to kill me. The front door opened before I could knock. Sarah, sweetheart. Come in, come in. Linda's smile was radiant, but her eyes were cold as winter. I made fresh coffee. Your father's favorite blend. The mention of coffee made my stomach clench. How many times had she served Dad his favorite drinks, laced with just enough antifreeze to slowly destroy his organs? You said you found some documents? I did. Very interesting ones. Linda led me to the kitchen, where Dad's laptop sat open on the table. My heart sank. She'd been going through his files more thoroughly. Your father was quite the digital detective toward the end, wasn't he? The browser history was displayed on screen, all of Dad's desperate searches laid out in chronological order. But Linda had added her own annotations in red text. Evidence of severe paranoid delusions, Dr. Kim consultation notes attached. Patient exhibiting classic signs of dementia-related conspiracy thinking. Recommended psychiatric evaluation refused by patient. She'd created an entire fictional medical narrative to explain away Dad's research. Dr. Kim's notes are very thorough, Linda said, pouring coffee into Dad's favorite mug. He documented Robert's decline beautifully. The paranoid ideation, the obsessive internet research, the growing distrust of family members. Dr. Kim doesn't exist. The words slipped out before I could stop him. Linda's hand paused over the coffee mug. I'm sorry? Dr. Peterson retired in November. Dad never switched doctors. There is no Dr. Kim at Northwestern. I watched her face carefully. Just like there was no recent dementia diagnosis. For a moment, Linda's mask slipped entirely. The grieving widow disappeared, replaced by something calculating and cold. Then she smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oh, Sarah. I was hoping we could do this the easy way. She slid the coffee mug across the table toward me. Your father said the same thing, you know. Right before he died. Dr. Kim doesn't exist, Linda. I know what you're doing. My blood turned to ice. You're confessing? I'm sharing family memories. Robert was so paranoid toward the end, making wild accusations. Claiming I was poisoning him, demanding I call doctors who didn't exist. Linda sat across from me, cradling her own mug. Drink your coffee, sweetheart. It's getting cold. I'm not thirsty. Of course you're not. Just like Robert stopped being thirsty. Stopped eating my cooking, stopped trusting anything I gave him. Linda's voice carried genuine frustration. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to poison someone who won't consume anything you prepare? I had to get very creative those last few weeks. She was admitting everything, speaking as casually as if she was discussing the weather. Linda had moved beyond pretense now. She knew this conversation could only end one way. How creative. His toothpaste. His shampoo. The lip balm he used for his chapped lips every morning. Linda's smile was genuinely proud. Ethylene glycol absorbs through skin with repeated application. Takes longer than ingestion, but it's much harder to detect. Robert thought he was being so careful, inspecting every meal. He never suspected his bathroom routine was killing him. I fought to keep my expression neutral while every cell in my body screamed at me to run. Linda hadn't just poisoned Dad's food, she'd contaminated everything he touched, turning his daily routine into a slow execution. The antifreeze crystals in his office. Why did you keep them? Linda laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You did find those. I wondered what you'd been doing in there. Those weren't evidence, sweetheart. Those were insurance. Insurance? For you, obviously. Sarah Chan, the troubled daughter who couldn't handle her grief. Who became obsessed with conspiracy theories about her stepmother, just like her father. Who tragically overdosed on antifreeze in a misguided attempt to prove her delusions. Linda tilted her head, studying me like a specimen. The police will find your fingerprints all over that bag. They'll find your browser history researching the same symptoms Robert was Googling. And they'll find your suicide note, explaining how guilt over abandoning your father drove you to follow in his paranoid footsteps. The scope of her plan hit me like a physical blow. Linda hadn't kept those crystals as trophies, she planted them for me to find, ensuring my DNA would be all over evidence of antifreeze possession. She'd been setting me up from the moment I walked into Dad's office. Except I'm not drinking your coffee. No, you're not. Linda stood and walked to the kitchen drawer, removing a large chef's knife. Plan B it is, then. Sarah Chan, murdered by an intruder during a burglary gone wrong. The grieving stepmother who tried to defend her, but arrived home too late. The blade caught the kitchen light as she moved closer. You know what your father's last words were, Sarah? Tell Sarah I'm sorry I couldn't protect her from you. The knife gleamed in Linda's hand, but I forced myself to stay calm. Through the kitchen window, I could see shadows moving in the backyard, William's backup team getting into position. Dad never said that. I kept my voice steady, taking a small step backward. He died alone at his computer at 12:47 a.m. The coroner's report shows he was found in his office chair. Linda's smile faltered. You've been busy, haven't you? Just like Robert, always digging, always questioning. She adjusted her grip on the knife. He found David's death certificate, you know. Had it shipped from Arizona 3 days before he died. $50 for expedited processing. I saw the charge on his credit card. My heart hammered against my ribs. What did it say? Cause of death, acute renal failure secondary to toxic ingestion. David's brother had demanded an autopsy. Linda's voice carried bitter satisfaction. Unfortunately, ethylene glycol metabolizes quickly. By the time they tested his blood, there wasn't enough left to prove anything. Just elevated kidney markers that could indicate any number of conditions. She was telling me exactly how she'd gotten away with murder twice. But she was also confirming details that only the killer would know. The Arizona Nursing Board suspended you because of those 2 patients who died. Medication errors. Linda shrugged. Happens all the time in hospitals. Elderly patients are so fragile, and insulin is such a dangerous drug when administered incorrectly. But the families made noise, demanded investigations. It became easier to relocate. Insulin. She hadn't just killed her husbands, Linda had been murdering patients in Arizona. The suspension was for 3 deaths, not 2. How many people have you killed? People die, Sarah. It's what they do. Linda moved closer, the knife steady in her grip. I just help them along sometimes. David was miserable anyway, diabetes, depression, mounting medical bills. Robert was becoming a burden to himself and everyone around him. Those patients in Phoenix were suffering. And me? What's your justification for killing me? Linda's expression hardened. You're a loose end. Robert should have left well enough alone, but he had to play detective. Now you're following in his footsteps, and I can't have that. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of movement on the side lawn. The police were almost in position, but Linda was getting impatient. Her knuckles were wide around the knife handle. The storage unit, I said quickly. What's in it? Insurance policies. Death certificates. Medical records from Phoenix. Linda laughed. Did you think I was sentimental? Unit 247 at Secure Space on Halstead contains documentation for everyone I've helped transition to a better place. Including detailed notes about their symptoms, their timelines, their final words. She was admitting to keeping murder journals. Detailed records of multiple homicides, stored in a climate-controlled unit 12 miles from here. Why keep records? Professional development. Each case taught me something new about dosages, delivery methods, victim psychology. Linda's eyes gleamed with scientific pride. David fought the hardest, took almost 6 months to complete his transition. Robert was quicker, maybe 10 weeks total. You would have been fastest of all, if you'd just drunk the coffee. The casual way she discussed murder timelines made my stomach churn. Linda wasn't just a serial killer, she was a methodical researcher, perfecting her techniques with each victim. The house in Sedona. You already have someone picked out. Marcus Webb, 67, widowed last year. Owns a small ranch, no children, $800,000 in assets. Linda smiled. We've been corresponding online for 3 weeks. He's very lonely, very trusting. Very much looking forward to meeting his new neighbor. She was already hunting her next victim, planning Dad's replacement before his body was cold. A shadow moved past the kitchen window. Linda noticed and spun toward it, knife raised. Looks like you brought friends, Sarah. How disappointing. The kitchen window exploded inward as Detective Williams and 2 officers crashed through. Linda spun toward them, the knife still gripped in her hand, and for one terrifying moment I thought she might try to fight her way out. Instead, she started laughing. Perfect timing, detective. You just heard Sarah threaten to kill me. Linda's voice shifted back to that wounded widow tone, tears springing to her eyes with practiced ease. She's been making wild accusations all evening, claiming I murdered Robert. I was so frightened I had to defend myself. Williams had his gun drawn, trained on Linda, but his expression showed genuine uncertainty. Ma'am, drop the weapon. Now. This poor girl has completely snapped, Linda continued, letting tears roll down her cheeks. She found Robert's browser history, all those paranoid searches about poisoning, and she's convinced herself his delusions were real. She broke into his office earlier today, stole evidence, and now she's threatening me in my own home. My blood ran cold. Linda was flipping the script even now, turning my accusations back on me. To anyone who hadn't heard her confession, it would look exactly like she described, the unstable daughter harassing the grieving widow. Detective Williams, I said carefully, please tell me your backup team was recording through the windows. We caught the last 5 minutes, Williams confirmed, but his tone was grim. Not enough for a full confession. Linda's smile widened triumphantly. 5 minutes of what, detective? A frightened woman trying to calm down her disturbed stepdaughter? Sarah has been obsessed with conspiracy theories about me since the funeral. Ask anyone, I've been worried about her mental state for weeks. She was right. Linda had been planting seeds about my mental state with everyone we knew. Phone calls expressing concern about my grief, texts about how I was taking Robert's death so hard. She'd been building reasonable doubt before she even decided to kill me. The storage unit, I said desperately. Unit 247 at Secure Space on Halstead. She just told me she keeps murder journals there, documentation of everyone she's killed. More delusions, Linda said sadly, finally setting down the knife. Detective, Sarah has been making increasingly wild claims all evening. First I poisoned Robert, then I killed my previous husband, now I'm some sort of serial killer with a storage unit full of evidence. Does any of that sound rational to you? Williams looked between us, clearly trying to decide who to believe. The evidence was on my side, but Linda's performance was Oscar-worthy. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come downtown to answer some questions, Williams said finally. Of course, detective. I want to help Sarah get the treatment she clearly needs. Linda reached for her purse, moving slowly and deliberately. I should probably call my attorney first, though. Not because I've done anything wrong, but because these accusations are so serious. Her hand emerged from the purse holding a small revolver. Nobody move. Linda's voice went flat and cold again, the mask completely dropped. Detective, put your weapon on the counter. Officers, hands where I can see them. Williams hesitated for half a second, then complied. Linda, don't make this worse for yourself. Worse? Linda laughed, keeping the gun trained on me while watching the officers. Detective, I've killed at least 7 people across 3 states. I'm already looking at life in prison or the death penalty. What exactly could be worse? 7 people. She'd admitted to Dad, David Morrison, and 2 patients in Phoenix. That left 3 more victims I didn't know about. The recordings we have are inadmissible because you obtained them through illegal surveillance, Linda cut him off. I know the law, Detective Williams. 20 years as a nurse teaches you a lot about evidence collection and legal procedures. She was right again. Williams had been recording through the windows without a warrant, which meant everything she'd said might be thrown out in court. But here's what's going to happen, Linda continued. Sarah and I are going to take a drive. Somewhere private where we can finish our conversation. You're going to wait exactly 1 hour before following us, which gives me enough time to complete my work and disappear. Linda. 1 hour, detective. If you follow us sooner, Sarah dies immediately instead of after I'm done asking her questions about what else she might have told people. Linda's smile was ice cold. Move toward the front door. All of you. Sarah, you're driving. As we moved through the house, Linda kept the gun pressed against my back. I could feel Williams calculating angles, looking for opportunities, but Linda had positioned herself perfectly. Any sudden moves would end with me dead. The Arizona detective will connect the dots, I said quietly. Martinez has been waiting 4 years for someone to call about you. Martinez retired 8 months ago, Linda replied. Convenient timing, really. All those old case files probably got buried in bureaucratic transitions. My heart sank. Linda had been monitoring the investigation that nearly caught her, waiting for the right moment to resurface. She knew exactly which threats were real and which were just shadows. Keys, Linda ordered as we reached my car. I handed them over, and she gestured for me to get in the passenger seat. Williams and his officers watched helplessly from the porch as Linda climbed behind the wheel, gun still trained on me. Unit 247, I called out the window to Williams. Secure Space on Halstead. Whatever happens to me, check that storage unit. Linda started the engine. Oh, Sarah. You still don't understand, do you? Understand what? There is no storage unit. I made that up to waste their time while we make our escape. She pulled out of the driveway, checking the rearview mirror. Everything important is already in my car, parked 2 blocks away. By the time they figure out I lied about the storage unit, I'll be halfway to the Canadian border with a new identity. As we drove into the night, I realized Linda Morrison had been planning this endgame for months. She'd prepared for every contingency except one. She didn't know I'd been live-streaming our entire conversation to the cloud. The livestream notification glowed dimly on my smartwatch as Linda drove us through empty suburban streets. She'd been so focused on my phone, which she made me turn off, that she'd missed the backup recording system I'd activated before walking into her house. Somewhere in the cloud, servers were storing every word of her confession. Even if she killed me tonight, Linda Morrison's voice would survive, admitting to 7 murders across 3 states. Where are we going? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Someplace quiet where we can have a proper conversation. Linda glanced at me, gun resting casually in her lap. You've been very thorough, Sarah. I need to know exactly what evidence you've collected and who you've shared it with. I told you everything already. Did you? Because professional experience has taught me that people always hold something back. Your father certainly did. Her voice carried that clinical detachment again. Right up until the end, Robert kept insisting he'd hidden evidence somewhere I'd never find it. Took him 3 days of questioning before he admitted he was bluffing. My stomach dropped. 3 days? February 12th through 14th, Robert didn't have a sudden heart attack, Sarah. He had a very gradual one, induced by increasingly concentrated doses of ethylene glycol mixed with potassium chloride. Linda turned onto a dark industrial road. I kept him conscious as long as possible, asking the same questions I'm about to ask you. The timeline clicked into place with horrible clarity. Dad's final searches had stopped on February 14th at 11:47 p.m., not because he died, but because Linda had finally decided he'd told her everything useful. The browser history was his final act of defiance, I said. Robert was stubborn. Even while dying, he refused to give me his laptop password. I had to wait for rigor mortis to set in, then use his fingerprint to unlock it. Linda's tone suggested mild professional frustration. I planned to delete everything, but then I realized his searches might actually be useful for discrediting any future accusations. We were approaching an abandoned warehouse district, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry to the nearest neighbor. My livestream was still running, but that wouldn't help me if Linda had hours to extract information through torture. The Arizona detective you mentioned, Martinez. She's not retired. Linda's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Excuse me? I called her this morning. Detective Maria Martinez, Arizona Board of Nursing Fraud Investigation. She told me they've been tracking Linda Morrison for 4 years, waiting for you to surface somewhere. I watched Linda's profile in the dashboard light. She said you made mistakes in Phoenix that took time to uncover. You're lying. 3 patients died under suspicious circumstances. David Morrison. 2 others whose families demanded autopsies. I kept talking, hoping the livestream was capturing everything. Martinez said they found traces of insulin tampering in all 3 cases, but needed more evidence to build a prosecutable case. Linda pulled into an empty parking lot behind a shuttered factory. The nearest streetlight was 50 yards away, leaving us in near complete darkness. Martinez couldn't prove anything then, and she can't prove anything now. Linda shifted the car into park but kept the engine running. Insulin breaks down too quickly. Ethylene glycol metabolizes within hours. By the time anyone thinks to look for evidence, it's already gone. What about potassium chloride? How fast does that disappear? Linda went very still. What did you say? Potassium chloride. You just told me you used it on Dad, mixed with the antifreeze. I'm guessing that's what actually stopped his heart. I met her eyes in the dim light. How long does potassium chloride stay detectable in tissue samples, Linda? Her face had gone pale. Potassium chloride was the missing piece, the component that would still be present in Dad's body, even 3 weeks after death. Sarah, how much do you actually know about forensic toxicology? More than you think. Marketing executives research everything, Linda. Including the detection windows for various murder methods. I smiled grimly. Potassium chloride concentrates in cardiac tissue and can be detected months after death with the right testing. Linda raised the gun, pointing it directly at my chest. But her hand was shaking now. You're bluffing. Just like Robert. Am I? Then why are you afraid to find out? The livestream light on my watch pulsed steadily in the darkness as Linda's gun trembled in her grip. I could see her calculating, trying to determine if I was bluffing about the potassium chloride detection. You want to know what else I researched? I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. The Illinois State Police Crime Lab processes tissue samples for potassium chloride testing every day. Takes about 72 hours for results. Linda's breathing had become shallow. The body was cremated. There are no tissue samples. Are you sure about that? Her eyes widened slightly. The funeral home confirmed cremation on February 22nd. I have the death certificate. You have a death certificate. But Dad donated his organs before cremation, remember? The Illinois Eye Bank kept his corneas. Northwestern Memorial kept tissue samples for their cardiac research program. I watched her face crumble as the implications hit her. Those samples are sitting in freezers right now, waiting for someone to request the right tests. You're lying. But Linda's voice cracked on the words. Call Detective Williams. Ask him what the medical examiner found when they reopened Dad's case yesterday. I leaned forward slightly. Because I didn't just find your evidence, Linda. I gave them everything they needed to get exhumation orders for tissue samples. The gun wavered as Linda processed this. She'd been so focused on controlling the narrative, on staying ahead of suspicion, that she'd never considered stored biological samples. The detection window for potassium chloride in preserved tissue is 6 to 8 months, I continued. Dad died 3 weeks ago. You left a chemical signature in his heart that's going to send you to death row. Linda lowered the gun slowly, staring at me with something approaching respect. You've been planning this since the funeral. Since I found his browser history. Dad taught me never to start a fight I couldn't finish. I kept my voice calm despite wanting to scream. He spent his last weeks building a case against you. I spent the last 3 weeks finishing what he started. The dinner conversation. You weren't just recording for evidence, you were making me confess to details only the killer would know. Linda's clinical mask was completely gone now, replaced by grudging admiration. Very sophisticated for a marketing executive. Dad was a forensic accountant for 30 years. He taught me how to build airtight cases. My watch showed the live stream had been running for 47 minutes. Every detail you just gave me, the 3-day timeline, the potassium chloride mixture, the insulin tampering in Arizona, it's all being recorded and uploaded in real time. Linda looked down at my wrist, seeing the notification light for the first time. Her face went dead white. Live streamed to 3 separate cloud services. Even if you destroy my watch, delete my accounts, and kill me right here, those recordings are already in police hands. I smiled grimly. Detective Williams has been watching this entire conversation. As if on cue, my watch buzzed with an incoming message, units in position. Keep her talking. Linda saw the notification and laughed, a broken, desperate sound. So this was all theater. The scared stepdaughter, the emotional manipulation, the evidence gathering. You've been hunting me. The same way you hunted Dad. The same way you hunted David Morrison and those patients in Phoenix and whoever the other 3 victims were. I leaned back in the passenger seat. The only difference is that when I hunt killers, they actually deserve what happens to them. Linda stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing again. 7 victims, Sarah. Did you really think Robert and David and those hospital patients were my only kills? My blood turned cold. What do you mean? Marcus Webb and Sedona. Sweet, lonely Marcus who's been corresponding with me for 3 weeks. Linda's smile was razor sharp. He's not waiting for me to move to Arizona, Sarah. He's been dead since last Tuesday. The livestream light pulsed steadily as Linda's words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Webb, the lonely widower she'd been planning to target, was already dead. Last Tuesday, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You killed him remotely? Potassium supplements mixed into his morning coffee creamer. I mailed him a care package 2 weeks ago, homemade cookies, local honey, and premium creamer for his coffee. Linda's clinical detachment had returned. Marcus was so grateful for the thoughtful gift from his new pen pal. He sent me photos of himself enjoying the cookies. My stomach churned. She'd been perfecting long-distance murder while I thought she was just planning her escape to Arizona. The care package, I said, understanding flooding through me. That's how you've been killing people in other states without being there. Mail-order murder is surprisingly efficient. No travel records, no physical presence, no witnesses. Linda shifted the gun to her other hand, checking the rearview mirror for police movement. Marcus was victim number 8, not 7. I miscounted earlier. 8 people. Linda Morrison had killed 8 people that she was willing to admit to. The scope of her crimes was staggering. Who were the others? Does it matter? They're all dead, Sarah. Just like you're going to be, just like your father, just like anyone else who gets in my way. But Linda's voice carried less conviction now. The knowledge that everything was being recorded had rattled her confidence. My watch buzzed again, 2 minutes out. Keep her distracted. It matters to their families, I said. It matters to the people who love them and never got answers about why they died. Love. Linda spat the word like it tasted bitter. Robert loved you, Sarah. Spent his final days trying to reach you, trying to warn you about me. Fat lot of good that love did him. The cruelty was intentional, designed to break me emotionally. But Dad's love had done more good than Linda realized. It had left me a trail of evidence that was about to destroy her. Margaret Chen, 1994, I said quietly. Linda's head snapped toward me. What did you say? Margaret Chen. My mother. She didn't die of complications from pneumonia like the death certificate said. I watched Linda's face carefully. She died of potassium chloride poisoning, administered by a nursing student named Linda Kowalski who was doing her clinical rotation at Northwestern Memorial. The gun trembled in Linda's grip. That's impossible. You were 8 years old. There's no way you could know. Dad knew. He figured it out 3 months ago, didn't he? That's when his searches really started, when he realized his wife of 3 years was the same person who'd murdered his first wife 29 years ago. I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. Linda Kowalski became Linda Morrison after she married David. Linda Morrison became Linda Chen when she married Dad. How many other identities have you used? Your mother was dying anyway, Linda whispered. Stage 4 lung cancer, maybe 6 weeks left. I just shortened her suffering. She was getting better. The cancer was responding to treatment. Dad showed me her medical records. She was in partial remission when she suddenly went into cardiac arrest. Tears stung my eyes, but I kept talking. You killed her because you wanted Dad, didn't you? You'd been watching him, planning to comfort the grieving widower. Robert was so handsome in his grief. So vulnerable, so ready for someone to take care of him. Linda's mask had slipped completely now. But he wasn't ready to move on as quickly as I'd hoped. Took him 8 years to even consider dating again. So you waited. You kept tabs on him for 8 years, until you thought enough time had passed. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. How many other people did you kill while you were waiting for Dad to be ready? Linda smiled. Does it really matter now, Sarah? You've got enough evidence to convict me 10 times over. The exact body count is just details. Headlights swept across the parking lot as unmarked police cars surrounded us from 3 directions. Detective Williams' voice crackled through a megaphone. Linda Morrison, you're surrounded. Release the hostage and step out of the vehicle with your hands visible. Linda looked at the approaching officers, then back at me. You know what the funny thing is, Sarah? Your father never stopped loving your mother. Even after 3 years of marriage to me, he still kept Margaret's photos on his nightstand. Still wore his old wedding ring on a chain around his neck. I know. He loved her until the day he died. And now you know I'm the one who took her from him. From both of you. Linda raised the gun one final time. That has to hurt more than anything I could do to you physically. Actually, it doesn't. Linda frowned. What? Because knowing the truth means Mom finally gets justice. Dad finally gets justice. And you finally get caught. I smiled through my tears. That's worth everything, Linda. Even this. The sound of breaking glass filled the air as SWAT officers smashed through the rear windows. The SWAT team moved with precision I'd only seen in movies. Linda spun toward the shattered rear window, gun wavering between me and the officers, her face a mask of desperate calculation. For one terrifying moment, I thought she might try to take me with her. Instead, she dropped the weapon and started crying. I never meant for any of this to happen, she sobbed, raising her hands as officers swarmed the vehicle. Sarah, you have to believe me. Your father was getting so paranoid, so violent. I was afraid he was going to hurt me. Even now, even surrounded by armed police with hours of recorded confessions, Linda Morrison was still trying to manipulate the narrative. Still playing the victim. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, Detective Williams said as he cuffed her. I'd strongly suggest you exercise that right. But Linda kept talking as they pulled her from the car. Sarah, honey, I know how this looks, but you have to understand, your father wasn't well. The things he was saying about your mother, about me, they weren't real. He needed help. I watched them load her into the back of a squad car, still spinning lies even as the door slammed shut. Through the window, I could see her mouth moving, probably crafting her defense strategy for whatever lawyer would be unlucky enough to represent her. Detective Williams helped me out of the passenger seat, his expression a mixture of relief and professional admiration. Ms. Chen, what you did tonight was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. But it worked. It worked because you got lucky. Linda Morrison has killed at least 9 people across 4 states. She could have easily made it 10. Williams shook his head. Next time you decide to catch a serial killer, maybe give us a heads up first? There won't be a next time, detective. I'm going back to marketing. 6 months later, I sat in a Chicago courtroom listening to Linda Morrison's sentencing. The judge's words carried the weight of justice 30 years in the making. Linda Morrison, also known as Linda Kowalski, Linda Webb, and Linda Chen, this court finds you guilty of 9 counts of first-degree murder across multiple jurisdictions. The systematic, premeditated nature of your crimes, spanning 3 decades and targeting the most vulnerable members of our society, represents a level of calculated evil that demands the harshest possible punishment. The tissue samples from Dad's donated organs had contained exactly what I told Linda they would, concentrated potassium chloride that proved his murder beyond any reasonable doubt. Arizona had reopened David Morrison's case and exhumed his body, finding the same chemical signature. The FBI had connected Linda to 7 other suspicious deaths dating back to 1994. Mom's case was reopened too. After 29 years, Margaret Chen's death certificate was amended to read homicide by poisoning. Dad never lived to see that justice, but somehow I knew he was aware of it. Linda got 9 life sentences without possibility of parole. Illinois doesn't have the death penalty anymore, but spending the rest of her life in maximum security seemed fitting. She'd stolen decades from her victims, now the state would steal every remaining day from her. After the sentencing, I drove to Dad's grave and sat by his headstone for an hour, telling him everything that had happened. The investigation, the trial, Linda's final pathetic attempts to claim insanity. She kept your browser history, I said to the granite marker bearing his name. Thought it made you look crazy. She never understood that it made you look like exactly what you were, a man trying to save his own life and protect his daughter. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees as I placed fresh flowers on his grave and Mom's, finally buried side by side where they belonged. Your search history saved my life, Dad. It saved everyone Linda would have killed next. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, peace. The questions that had haunted me since Dad's death finally had answers. Linda Morrison would never hurt anyone again. And somewhere, I hoped, Robert and Margaret Chen were finally together, free from the woman who had torn their family apart. Justice, it turned out, was worth the wait.